A few days ago, we got an overview trailer for Metroid Prime 4, as well as people talking about the previews that Nintendo had invited them to, and there's one part of the game being trashed to hell and back, and that's the new character, Miles McKenzie. I'll be upfront. I watched the press start video, which was 20 minutes of gameplay, and while a lot could have been cut out, if this character is unbearable and killed your hype for the game, then I question how hype you were for it in the first place. I'm being a little facetious, but this character isn't nearly as bad as people are saying. Now, in all fairness, the reason people are worried is because of the articles that paint him as a constant companion, someone who's always going to be in your ear talking to you. But not only does that not seem to be the case based on the gameplay I watched and other videos saying he sticks behind at some point, and when they got stuck on a puzzle he didn't call in to spoon feed the answer, but also you'd think that if the game had a character who was Samus's sidekick or mission control, they would mention that in the overview trailer, considering they felt the need to mention that you could jump. My guess would be that each area of this game, or at least the ones with other soldiers we saw in the overview trailer, will have a part where they're with you, and we'll have a segment where you're helping them before they find something to occupy themselves with while you go on alone. But even with the little time he's on screen, again, at least that I've been able to see, his comments aren't all that annoying. Maybe unnecessary at points, but nothing that would take me out of the experience while playing. And without the subtitles, I don't know if I'd be able to hear him during the combat. And some of the lines that were bad actually got a chuckle out of me because of Samus's silent reaction of just staring at him. The other point, one a little bit more valid in my opinion, is that other people being here ruins the isolated atmosphere that the Metroid series is known for. And I do get where this comes from. Super Metroid and Metroid Prime are often considered the best games, and they both excel at this feeling of isolation. However, the series has always been doing more than that since Super Metroid, and if every game just copied what made Super great, then the series would have stagnated a long time ago. In the 2D games, Fusion had Adam constantly telling you what to do, and the SAX chasing you. It still felt like you were mostly alone, but it wasn't nearly as solitary, especially when we get so many scenes of Samus's thoughts. Dread followed this too, with not only Adam, but Quiet Robe being there as well. Even though he dies, we know that people can still inhabit this planet, and we have Ravenbeak waiting for us. Hell, I'd say that game is at its best when you know you're not alone, because the beeping of the Emmys is great at making you second guess how close they are. It's like the SAX, but better. And the Prime series has been straying from the isolation for even longer. The only game to really do it was the first, and sure, I think it's the best, but the atmosphere that I think defines this game more isn't that there's nobody on the planet, but rather that there's nobody on the planet anymore. The proof that sentient life used to be here, but they're all gone. And that's totally possible to replicate with another character as long as they aren't like a super export on the planet or what became of it. And even then, as long as they aren't just an encyclopedia and you get to explore most of the space first. Prime 2 had space pirates, and also the Luminoth that were talking to you. Sure, 3 of the 4 of them are dead, but again, the vibe here that I think makes the game stand out isn't the isolation, but the various marks of death. The signs of life that feel recent as the war between light and dark is ongoing, albeit in a stalemate. Prime 3 doesn't go for isolation at all. Instead, it lets the Galactic Federation play a much bigger role, which in my eyes was refreshing. Not only did Samus used to work for the Federation, but they also give her all the bounties we see in the games, but we know next to nothing about them. Aside from a rogue faction making Metroids, come to think of it, that was never brought up again. If anything, I think Prime 3 needed more dialogue. I understand the story they tried to tell, but it falls flat because they weren't willing to commit to it fully. Not only did I not understand that the corrupted bounty hunters were actually dying until I had already fought 2 of them, I thought these were just clones like Dark Samus, but the weight of their deaths meant nothing to me because I barely know these people. We barely interacted before we were all knocked out, and what little interaction we did get was all one-sided. The games after Super Metroid, while taking cues from it, are compelling to me because of how different they are. I mentioned at the end of my Prime 3 video that even though I prefer Prime 1, I'm glad that 2 and 3 took risks and were willing to warp the normal Metroid format because it made it more interesting to play through those games, especially back to back. And the reason I like Prime 1 more than 2 or 3 isn't because it's more like Super Metroid in tone or isolated atmosphere, but I just think the level design and areas are more interesting than 3. And I think 2 is just frankly kind of annoying with the dark world and the lack of checkpoints before some tough boss fights. I didn't realize it soon enough to mention during my 2D Metroid marathon, but that's an aspect I respect the hell out of the series for, and it's why I think most of the games are pretty timeless. The only games that I think feel like they're just replicating what an older game did are Super Metroid, being sort of a remix of Metroid 1, and Zero Mission, which is a remix of Metroid 1. But even then, they don't just try to replicate what worked, they try their own things and succeed for different reasons. If each game was just trying to be Super Metroid again, the series would get really boring. Sure, I may prefer Super Metroid's atmosphere over Fusion's, but because Fusion goes for its own thing entirely, there are times where I feel like playing that over Super, and it avoids replacing Super Metroid by not just being Super Metroid but better. Every game brings something different to the table, and while I obviously prefer some over others, the variety makes every game something worth experiencing at least once, even Metroid 1. For an example of what I mean, take Devil May Cry. I really like DMC4, but I've barely touched it since 5 came out, because with the exception of Trish and Lady being playable, in my opinion, 5 does everything 4 does, but better. Gameplay-wise, anyway. And while I wouldn't tell anyone to skip DMC4, if they could only pick one and ask for my advice, I would tell them that 5 is a better version of 4, and Metroid doesn't have that. None of the games really set out to fully replace a previous entry. So Prime 4 having other Federation members stranded with you shouldn't be that big of a surprise because the games have always tried to do something unique from each other. And furthermore, this feels like a natural evolution of Prime 3. Now, some people have asked if Nintendo has learned nothing from Other M, which to me says they don't actually know why Other M is bad. Other M's story is bad because Samus sounds bored, the story is a convoluted mess, Samus's character arc feels redundant for its place in the timeline without giving any proper reasoning, her relationship with Adam feels one-sided, and multiple plot points are reserved off-screen because the writers weren't authorized to write satisfying payoffs to the things that they set up. It's easy to see another group of Galactic Federation characters and compare them to the Other M group, but that ignores why these characters suck in the first place. They don't suck in concept, they suck because of underwhelming execution. The only thing that these characters do is die, and that includes Adam, who arbitrarily shoots you in the back first. The only exception is Anthony because they try to give him a bit more character through his relationship with Samus and because he's the GOAT. If anything, Miles McKenzie has me hopeful because by being a little quirky, it shows me that he actually has a character. Through the little dialogue I've seen, I have a solid grasp on the kind of person he is and his backstory, at least what's relevant to this game. He's someone who's not used to being stranded like this, so him talking a lot, especially to himself, is a way of calming his nerves and keeping himself sane. And even if it's a little annoying, I like that he has characterization that I can grasp onto. And again, if anything, the problem here is Samus's lack of responses. She's not mute, so her lack of reaction to him in any way is kind of jarring. She doesn't ask if he's okay, who he is, if he knows anything helpful, like if anyone else was teleported with them. I mentioned her lack of reaction being a good punchline, but it would be better if she normally did respond. That way her lack of a response feels like a choice her character made, and not Nintendo being scared because of Other M. Like, people are saying they learned nothing from Other M, but in my opinion, they took the wrong lesson away. It's like they're now scared of giving Samus any kind of characterization that might upset fans, but not having her talk is just jarring. It's the same problem with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I'm all for the games evolving their storytelling by being more cinematic and having voice acting, but you have to fully commit to one or the other, otherwise it doesn't work. Samus not talking worked when there was no one to talk to. The issue with Other M was that she just took every silent moment to exposition dump in place of actually writing the characters or to remind you of what just happened 2 minutes ago through a flashback. I'm not saying I know what she would say here or what her characterization should be, but I think having her not respond is still characterization, but one that I don't think will make anyone happy. She doesn't have to talk a lot or nearly as much as she did in Other M, but she talks less than Kratos. I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that you have to be excited for Metroid Prime 4, or that I'm right that this character is going to be a minor part of the game, or that they aren't more annoying than I think based off the footage available to me. What I am saying is that I think the fears based on what we know is overblown. And the idea that Metroid has to be about isolation is reductive to the games, as there are a lot of other parts of the atmosphere that make them unique. And I think Retro Studios has earned enough good grace from the first 3 games for me to have faith in them. Here's hoping I'm right. None of us will know for sure until the full game is out and we can experience it for ourselves. Oh, wait, Miles is spelled with a Y? Never mind, Nintendo is doomed.